Welcome to tonight's lecture entitled In Another Light by the Edinburgh-based GROSS.MAX, part of the Berlage Keynotes, our ongoing series featuring internationally prominent architects, designers, and thinkers who are at the forefront of design discourse and innovation. Originally founded in 1995 by partners Bridget, Baines, and Eelco Hooftman, with Nigel Sampi joining as a partner in 2001, GROSS.MAX is widely considered as one of the few of the United Kingdom's proponents of a new generation of contemporary landscape. In recent years, GROSS.MAX has won numerous competition designs for public squares in London, such as Pottersfield Park and Lyric Square. Their work outside of the UK includes the design of the 200-acre site of Zaha Hadid's BMW plant in Leipzig, as well as we have a Neapolitan denizen in the audience here for the new landscape surrounding the high-speed rail station outside Naples. Mariano, I hope that you know this project. They've also won the landscape, the re-landscape for the former docklands of Bilbao's Nervion River. Bridget and Eelco have both been visiting professors at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. They have also done, projects that have been realized here in the Netherlands. I hope that everybody knows where the etymology of GROSS.MAX comes from, which, well, already in the typography, there's a certain allusion to that. At any rate, it's a pleasure, Bridget, to welcome you to the Berlage and the TU Delft to give this evening's keynote on behalf of the other partners of GROSS.MAX. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. It's so good to be here. Escaped from the corona lockdown. Thank you, Solomon, thank you. We're landscape architects, and we always, I think there's a difference, there's such a difference between landscape architecture and architecture. Often envious of the architect that can, which probably a lot of you are, that can stand proud against your creation and it's finalized and fixed and there. Whereas we often have to wait. We have to wait a long time often. We tend to be a bit more laid back and waiting for our projects to grow and to change and develop over time. Also, landscape is, it's very different here in the Netherlands. Your landscape is, your polder landscape is, it's of mud and peat, and it's a very organized landscape. It's a machine that's continually pumping away to kind of keep these polders out of water. Whereas our landscape is one of rocks. It's much slower. It erodes slower. It's a different kind of landscape. The city we're from is Edinburgh, which Solomon said, and that's a city of two parts really. On the right, you can the crag and tail that comes down from the castle, the rock, and a city that hugs the side of the slope and has small lanes and things. And on the left, you can see the other side, the Georgian laid out city with its little pieces of picturesque landscape captured in these gardens. So, and our office, we kind of sit in the middle. We sit between these two worlds, and I think actually that's probably quite influential to us sitting in the middle. It's almost like the brain between the two sides of the brain, and we try. And landscape for us is, architecture is very much about encapsulating space, whereas for landscape, it's all about the horizon and the eye looking towards the horizon. I think Emerson it was that said that the healthy eye needs to look to the horizon and needs space. And Dionysus and Apollo, we really, we feel we're kind of trying to reconcile these two kind of ways of thinking about the world, this kind of hedonistic, creative way, and this ordered and rational kind of way. And I think for us, landscape can kind of reconcile those two ways of thinking. And if we look to the early English garden, when the Brits were coming back from the Grand Tour, they were collecting all these artifacts and they were laying them out in these gardens. And it was very much about a route, a circuit through time and space, almost like the original cinematic experience. And when we first started 20 years or so ago, we had lots of time on our hands, and we used to sit there and write manifestos, this is from a long time ago, but this was very much kind of what we were trying to do, to treat landscape architecture as an aesthetic subject, and to try and move landscape away from the monstrous green blanket that was covering the world. And Alexander Pope, the genius loci, very important for landscape architects, the idea that there's a spirit of place and that we have to work with that place. But for us, there's also a lot of our projects, and most projects for landscape architects, they're about a kind of non-place, it doesn't have the there, and so we have to try and we have to be a bit more creative and try and invent, which we kind of term the ingenious loci. But landscape is retreat. It often is retreat, and people looking for that kind of lost world of and to get away, this desire to rest in the landscape, or what we call like romantic agony. We're wild at heart, but we're all looking for this passage of time and about growth, and landscape as the kind of lost paradise. Manet, this picture by Manet kind of sums that up. And the English garden in Munich, the Germans certainly in search of the lost paradise. And the sublime as well, this is all part of our landscape kind of history, the sublime landscape, traveling to Vesuvius to see the eruption of Vesuvius. And now you could say the new sublime is traveling, this is Iceland, the eruption of the volcano there. Still people are in search of the sublime. So we see it more as about framing the landscape, about zooming into the landscape, in really looking carefully at the landscape. Our idea, the idea about zooming in and zooming out and analyzing the landscape. We often say we're the children of the Google revolution, where we can Google and get into places in great detail. And the idea that the landscape is a setting, the 18th century Claude Glass, a convex mirror that you stood with when looked at the landscape, and it made it into a picture. And now the selfie age, still standing behind with the landscape as a background. William Hogarth, it's said to be one of the main aesthetic theories that's come out of Britain. The idea of the line of beauty, the sinuous curve that connects it all together. And recently we worked on a project there where it was actually where William Hogarth was born, and we added a line of beauty in testing it. So this idea that of the picturesque, of the idea of this peculiar beauty that gave a picturely quality to the landscape, and at the same time that was going on, the scientific way of kind of trying to analyze. This is a cyanometer that was devised by Saussure that actually analyzed the different levels of blue to look at the blueness of the sky. And as we're in Delft, I just thought I'd put this in because it's one of our early Photoshop efforts to see how the landscape in the Vermeer has changed over time. It's intriguing, and I'm sure you all, being from this place, they got the Dutch Golden Age and the scientific experiments that were going on and the creations that were going on at the same time as the artistic development, and the two things feeding together. And I really think that's what we need as a profession. That's what our profession is about. And Joseph Beuys, the German artist, very interestingly put this about the Dutch landscape, that you were reclaiming the land, and in doing that you're losing the eye of Holland, the mirror, the liquid mirror of Holland, and that the Dutch light was, because of this, the Dutch light was changing, and that the Dutch had not, because of this, it was having an effect on the painting. I'm sure this is, for me, this is a very familiar site because it's on Marken, but the idea of this is from the film The Dutch Light, that the light in Holland is so special because of the horizon, because of the low horizon and the voluminous sky, and the fact that because of that it's so low and the wind blows the clouds across rapidly, and really is an amazing place. Some years ago, we had the chance to work on a project at the Zuiderzee, the museum in Holland. We were asked to look at this triangle of land, an interesting piece of woodland, and we thought that to try and play a little bit with this idea of the reflective quality of the water. So along the bottom edge of the water, we made a kaleidoscope of light, we called it. A series of pools that had different colors of base to them, from shells to peat, and that this would act as a kind of a different kind of mirrors along the bottom of the area. And the other two sides would be in contrast to that. One would be a dike, a solid dike that faces the harbour, and the other would be a series of piers and islands that would collect the sediment, and so you'd have a different kind of landscape. And within the center of the woodland, we created a perfectly circular pool and a fence with a tiny little glimpse through so you could look through to this kind of magical world in the middle of the forest. A circular mirror in the middle of the darkness. How we work is, and this quote from Bruno sums it up: to think is to speculate in images. So our way, I mean, everyone has different ways, plans or thoughts, but our way is to work with images, and we make these images as a try and show something about what we want from the project, what kind of atmosphere we want, and these kind of serve as kind of more important than realistic images for us. These give us the inspiration for how we want to, the kind of places, the kind of spaces that we want to create. yeah, sometimes they're a bit more provocative. This was for the Strathclyde University, and the dean, when he was making the presentation, asked us to take out the sexy girl, and we had to replace it. And we had about global warming, local freezing. We had made this, or you said about the Naples, with Zaha, this was an early image where we wanted to make a big pool and to reflect Vesuvius down and to have that there. Or in China. And in Berlin, something about just the kind of energy we wanted along the edge of to connect the lower underground up to the park above. Or some ideas about rewilding the city of our own city of Edinburgh, or Cumbernauld, to try and transform the new town of Cumbernauld. But I want to first talk about nature. So that's kind of how we work, and some of the picturesque and the sublime ideas behind our work. But nature is our material. And it's a difficult, it's an interesting material, and it's it's an ever-changing thing that starts off one way and then changes over time. It changes through the seasons. It smells. You never really can tell what way it goes. And often we've worked with Pete Aldolf, who. Probably you know. This is Pottersfield Park in London, where a kind of community garden, a kind of play between a very open lawn and a very lush kind of garden. Or in the Hampshire Kunst piece of land. And in Edinburgh, the idea that we made a garden, a biodiversity garden that was a kind of route through time. But one thing that this really fascinates us. This is Charles Darwin, and along with Hooker, Hooker was the head of Kew Gardens at the time, and so Charles Darwin on his boat arrived on it was often a fueling place, Ascension Island in the middle of the Atlantic. It was a fueling place for the boats and things, which Charles Darwin said it was hideous in its nakedness because it was just a volcanic island with nothing growing on it. But they had this idea, which we found is fascinating. This idea that they could capture. It had no water, no sweet water. That by planting the island, that they could capture some clouds, and then they could have water, and then things would grow. So they brought plants from all over the world. Crazy mix, this really crazy mix of all these species that you would never think should be put together or would grow together. And and they grew this island. They grew there and created this. Not many native species. Well, they're not native species were there. This island, and then with its dew pond, and so the idea that you can actually you can create nature and ecosystems they can be created, and they don't have to have native species, or they don't have it can be a very creative part of our world. And this is real. This is not one of our. This is not a collage. That sheep really is there. Another interesting thing that I think, in terms of nature, is to look at all the weeds, the things that have been cleared over time, and that these are the survivors, the last survivors, that can inspire. Can inspire us. For example, we like this idea that you can activate nature, that you can insert more planting into the nature, and it gradually grows over time and becomes more more and more and more. And also, you know, it has a function as well. I mean, at Heathrow, we've been working at Heathrow Airport, and the idea that we can, by changing the grass between the runways, that we can actually capture more carbon than planting woodland. So the project's on hold now, but we had this idea then that we were going to start to test this species of grass that have these very long roots, and then they can capture quite a lot of carbon. Or in Berlin, at Tempelhof, which maybe some of you know, we won the project for the Tempelhof airport, and the idea that we could have a plane that circled over the head and drop seed bombs, and then that this would actually start to create patches of different kind of vegetation that was coming in, and that the flight pattern of the plane it showed our plan of the project, and that somehow would be an event that when the plane flew over and looped around and then through the bombs, that would be activating the area. A kind of giant Jackson Pollock painting. At the moment, we're working in London, at London Wall with Dilys Cofidio, and we're working on this project, and it's a graded ecosystem in a building. This idea that we can, in the balconies going up, we can have different types of soil from all over London, and then right down to the Blitz gravel on the top areas, and that by doing that we can kind of create a vertical ecosystem as part of the building. And in Budapest, we have this amazing site at the moment, which is an old, which will become a transport museum, and it's a fascinating place because it's the point where all the railways came in, all these railways that had travelled all the way from, you know, Romania and Serbia, and we have this idea that we can green this transport museum by using the seeds from all of these places that the train has passed through. So in the same way as you know, as Darwin created that special ecosystem, that by doing it in this kind of random way, we could maybe start to make a very special place for this transport museum in Budapest. So, yeah, the combination of the technical revolution and the biological evolution, I think, is very interesting in this project. I was saying, I want to look back on some of our projects that we've done. This is a project that we did. Johan Koenen asked us to look at Sibelco near Heerlen, in the south of Holland. He asked us to look at some interventions within the landscape. It's actually one of the most amazing pieces of landscape I've ever seen. They're mining for this white sand, this really pure sand. It's pure white because it has no iron in it. And before that, they were mining for coal. So you have these kind of layers of the coal mining finished in the 60s, and then they found this white sand that's really special and really valuable. And they want to carry on mining it. They need 10 more years for their lease. And so we were asked to kind of come in and look at the area and make a plan for that area. But what a wonderful opportunity to work and with these kind of materials, the black coal hill, the slag heap, these structures that the quarry have, the white sand, and the birch trees that are there. But one thing we said to them, that there was, they wanted us to do all these small things, the bridge and a pavilion and thing. We said, look, there's an elephant in the room that we're not talking about, and it's the fact that there's a slag heap that was designed in the 1930s. And that heap is a heap of coal that has to be moved in order for them to start to excavate for the sand. So we took that as a project. We call them Operation Mountain Rescue. And in the 1930s, this really was an early landscape project. The architect designed the hill. It was almost like a pyramid hill to play with the Heckensberg, to play with the surrounding landscape, a deliberately artificial hill. And this hill, as opposed to what was proposed at that time. And this hill, we set about the idea of how can we move this hill away so that then they can start to mine the sand. With endless studies of what the form of that hill should be, and the volume, calculating the volume of it and how it could go. And the thing about the hill is, if they start to move the material, it becomes, as soon as the sulfur meets oxygen, it starts to be very polluting. And so we had to kind of start to think about it as a whole system of how we can clean the runoff into a series of pools that can clean the water. So the water kind of is gradually purified. So it's not just a mountain, but it's a water purification system as well. But in moving the forest, the existing hill has a woodland on it, and it's very much loved by the local people. It's very much part, the locals use it. So we had to kind of try and engage with the public. So it had to become a public participation project as well. We had to kind of try and think, well, how we did it. So this is what is there at the moment. We've got all these different types of vegetation. We came up with the idea that it's pinched from Macbeth, the idea that we'd have the walking forest, that we would take these trees, and most of them are shallow rooted, so they can easily be transported and dug up and moved, and that we'd take those trees and make them into community projects and find projects throughout Hurlen. And that then, by doing that, then this would actually start to engage the local people in the project. And to scrape off the top layer of the existing mountain, and in that to collect all of these seeds. We wrote out there's 160 seeds from the flora that are there, and to take those and to use those on the new mountains. So we start to kind of use the old to generate a new. This is some of our, so that the new mountain would gradually become a forest. But this place is so special, and we had the thought that there should be a kind of museum. There should be something there that allows people to engage in the fact that it's been a mining. The mining has gone, and we thought that if we were able to create this almost like a black box where people could meet and talk and discuss the Anthropocene, and that this box, this concrete box, would then be covered by the hill and then the vegetation, and the box would just have a long slit window that would look out over the landscape, So it would really, people would be in there looking at the landscape at the same time as the exhibitions and the talks we found that there was a very important guy that contributed to the flora of the Carboniferous world, and he lived in Leiden and he collected 6,000 fossils, and these fossils are now in the archive. They're not on show in Leiden. So with the idea that we could bring these fossils back to here and celebrate not only the mining, but the idea that there was this all of these fossils were collected and kept here in Heerlen, and we would build a Carboniferous forest as well, and this would kind of start to explain some of his ideas. And this forest would take native. This forest would take ancient species like horsetails and we would show the transformation of the landscape over time. We had lake and reed right up to sequoia forest. So we have this kind of very strange, almost strange kind of world of the Carboniferous forest that would sit there next to the new hill. But obviously, like all good projects, we felt that it should also be a regeneration project, that there was the possibility that this could, well, we called it Silicon Valley Enterprise Zone, that we could use some of these redundant buildings to make a new strip of that could accommodate businesses and that this business, this strip would use this diagram shows underneath, the mines underneath are gradually filling up with water, and it's really hot, the water. So the idea that we could use, some of that water could be used for heat within the area, that we could make a kind of roofs of solar panels, that we could even put underground tubes within the Black Hill, and that we could somehow start to use all of these things to make this enterprise strip that would sit within the landscape. And that this strip also becomes bridge, so it kind of connects two parts, and the solar panels go over the bridge. So. This kind of very, very organized linear piece that sits within that landscape next to the hill and the Carboniferous forest. And as part of that, at the moment that they have these great big pipes that come out that shift the sand, and they make the piles of the silica sand, and they grade it and things, that we would try and use that infrastructure to make a garden, a sedimentation garden that would actually evolve over time. And at Harvard, our friend Bradley Cantrell has this fluid bed. So we used this fluid bed and to make a model, to test out how, if we were just to make all of these pieces of sand of different grades, different grain sizes, and we rin water through, what would happen? And I think, wait a minute, I can show you. Oh, sorry. Let me just see. This is a little video of it, but it doesn't seem to be picking it up. Oh, yeah, it did. Yeah. So on this fluid bed, they can kind of we could test out the idea see if we were to run water through, how it would all work. So we'd have this kind of Zen sedimentation garden that would sit next to the enterprise zone. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of these blue signs, which is what it is, a natural monument, protected and conserving the environment. And we made them a new name for it, it was about nature experiment and designing the landscape. And we actually made the sign and took it to them. So we took them the new sign to go up there, which was fun. I'm going to quickly move on to a very different scale, because I think that for us, that's what excites us, that landscape it goes from the really big to the really small. And actually, it's the very thing that's quite difficult as well, because, it's one thing designing on that level with on ecosystem. Another thing when you're getting into the more the materiality of the area and the proportions and the scale and the size. And we won this little competition in Germany to design a garden for a concrete manufacturer. And it was like, for us, we were like kids in a sweet shop, because we had to design a garden using all concrete products, all of their products. So we would just, their catalogue and things. And that this garden would just be purely of concrete, with the vegetation. And within that garden, and we took this idea from Miley Stevens from the expo in Paris, that his concrete trees, that we would create a whole hedge out of concrete. And this hedge, it fulfilled a function that Godelman wanted to have somewhere where they could display all their samples. And so this concrete hedge would be a place where they could place all of their samples, and it would be an ever-changing kind of hedge. And to move back again and towards the light and the idea of light. Fascinated and I'm sure you've all been fascinated when you fly into Holland. I was fascinated the other day. When I flew in, all I could see were all the sports pictures lit up there. But when you see all the glass houses lit in their different colours, and many years ago, we again won a competition, and we made this image. This is one of our early kind of images, and this is kind of what sold it to them, really. We had this idea to make a water feature of three different cubes of color, and that these helped to kind of deal with a tricky change in level, and that these three cubes had pools of water that reflected the light in them, and the water ran down the face of them. And this is where I like, well, we'd like to experiment with materials as well. And here we were asked to make this. We didn't know how the hell we were going to make it. We'd made the image, and then we had to make it. And so we had to go through a system of experimenting with gluing together the pieces of glass that the water would run down, and placing the perspex inside and testing. And similarly, another project which plays a little bit with the idea of how the colour of light affects plants. In Glasgow, we were asked to, this is a Dutch a glass house where the colour and they use. I asked to make this installation in Glasgow in Bellahouston Park, and we wanted to make a really pure greenhouse that had a crazy bit of landscape inside, and the landscape it had different colours of glass, and with the idea that we could kind of look at how the different plants grew under the different kind of colours of grass. And again, we're not architects, so I mean that's probably dead simple for you, but the idea that we had to try and make this piece of architecture, and we wanted to make a glass house that had no the supports for it was all in glass as well. It had to be pure. It had to be just glass there. And it has this kind of really weird world of rocks and plant and ferns that sit behind this glass. This kind of play of this pure glazed building with this weird kind of planting inside. I want to come back to Rotterdam because a project that we did 20 years ago for Breeze of Air, for the Hooftman, the redundant railway line, and I think it actually is, because maybe some of you know, I think it actually is going to be a project. They never asked us. We're a bit sad about it. We would have loved to have done it. Because here, we thought that it was just such an amazing opportunity. At the end of the line, there's this redundant piece of building that if we could put a glass box over that and have a winter garden on that, and then people could kind of meet in there and peep over into the city. And at night, this kind of weird world inside with the orchids at night time, this would be lit from inside, and you have all these projections of these orchids on the side for the locals of Rotterdam to view. But this project also was about almost like a prototype. I mean, it was way before the High Line in New York, but the idea that you could use the raised railway and make a connection into a walkway into the city, and that next to that we would have a public park that would utilize the arches that went underneath the railway. So it's a public space on two levels that connect together. And the top the patterning on the top would be based on the transect of the landscape through that the railways had come through. But now we actually have recently, I'll show the pictures of one that we've recently been working on, a raised walkway with Dilys Video in London. Here, I mean, this is in Greenwich. It's right on, maybe you know the dome in Greenwich, this whole new area of development. And the idea is to have a 5-kilometre running track that goes through all of the development. And part of that running track is on a raised level. Part of it is actually on the ground. And the diagram, these diagrams kind of show the kind of organization of it. The running track it needed something to kind of give it a kind of iconic image of, so that you could see the difference between when it was on the upper level and when it continued down onto the lower level. And we worked with the idea that it would be a regular lines that follow the meridian, from the meridian line from Greenwich. So that would be a constant thing that went all the way through the project. And that there would be these little yellow, you can see those little yellow islands. So there would be the islands that were connected by these pieces of stripy landscape. And some of the islands are actually on the ground level. Some of them are actually on the raised structure here. So you see all these little islands, and then Island 5 has a view out over the cantilever, over the Thames. So you can you have that nice connection of all the different levels within the landscape. And it's built. One project that is built. And these beautiful shapes that the Dilliscofidio structure, but these beautiful shapes also function in terms of allowing us enough depth to get the trees in. So each one of these shapes that comes down, we've got enough to get the root ball of the trees, so we can start to make these gardens. I just flick through. And it's a strange kind of raised area that goes through all these kind of electricity transformers, and so it kind of goes through this strange kind of world. And that strange world became an art project. You can see it says danger of death on it. So it's danger of death, and it's jazzed up with lots of different colors by the artist. So this is the big one that cantilevers over towards the Thames, and it kind of, we have a series of terraced gardens that go underneath that and up to the, connect up to the higher level. And at night, it really becomes quite a spectacle. I moved to China. And some people know, maybe probably know this area. We find it fascinating that like 200, and this is in Kew Gardens, William Chambers, which was another project. But we found it fascinating that now 250 years ago, the ideas of the Chinese garden we were bringing over to Great Britain, and now we're asked to do projects in China. So we were asked to do this this strip of garden that goes in the central business district from the KPF Tower, which probably some of you know. There's this garden, and this garden is on the perfectly aligned axis from the north to the south of the city. The KPF Tower. And the KPF Tower is 500 meters high, and then the garden, if you were just to lay that down, the garden is exactly 500 meters. When we're analyzing the skyline of Beijing and the mountains of Beijing, they almost follow the same silhouette. And we're intrigued with the idea of how, thinking about a Chinese garden, that it should have mountains and it should have water, and how we could bring those things into this small piece, in an abstract way, into this small piece of land. So we set about kind of looking at, originally we had the idea it could be a crystal mountain, this crystal mountain, that we could make out of a series of huge metal structures, this mountain range that would go down the side of the park, this red mountain range that would look different from different kind of views. And that would form one edge of the park. And next to that there would be a river, and an idea that there was a kind of river and a pool. And that this what's important within the city of Beijing is that this park then connects into the bigger green structure of Beijing. So hopefully it will start to kind of make sense within the city. And so between this, we would really make a packed piece of forest, and a mountain. And actually, the mountain range actually covers an underground shopping centre. So, and within that there are bridges. There will be bridges that kind of connect across, so you can actually go through the mountain and cross the mountain. And we actually wanted to cover up some of the actual outline that was proposed for the area. and a pond, a pool, a paddling pool where as a playful kind of element. That at night would have the projection of the moon, so we'd kind of make our own kind of projections onto this of the moon to show what stage the moon was at. Could even become an ice rink in the winter. And to keep out the city along the edge of the city on the east side, that we would make this this structure that could have a little kiosks in and things, and that there would be a boardwalk that went along there. We hope we'll go along there. And a green bridge that connects over the road into the green ring landscape on the other side. And at night, I mean, looking down from these towers at night, we hope that it becomes a very special view for the people working late at night. We keep looking for it, though. We don't know what's happened to it. This is off Google, and this is, right, we know the KPF tower is nearly there on this, but it's still just this ginormous hole in the ground, so hopefully one day. And to finish, I wanted to just talk about how our project in Tempelhof, this big flat landscape. I will talk about this. This is another hill, but the idea that we could actually make a mountain within that big flat. So we want to keep most of just the flatness of that, but just make one thing that is an elevation within the a kind of mountain that just a mysterious, almost sublime kind of experience within Berlin. Maybe influenced by Humboldt, who was born in Berlin. This kind of mountain, and the idea that the silhouette is very important within the landscape as well, and that we could. This could be a place where the angel from the Wings of Desire would be standing on the top, looking out over Berlin, ready to come down to the city. But inside the mountain, it would be a giant climbing walls so that people can use this to kind of climb the mountain on the inside. And how do you design it? We didn't know how to design a mountain, and we were thinking, and then we found on the beach this piece of rock. And who needs to design when you found the perfect mountain? So we scanned it and created the model from the scan, and this became the mountain maybe become the mountain in Berlin. I just wanted to finish. This is on a note from Werner Herzog, which I think is very apt. When he says that landscapes aren't picturesque or scenic backdrops, that landscapes are active members of the cast, and really fascinated by his idea that he can direct, just as he does animals and actors, that he can direct landscapes. And I think, yeah, that's actually, probably as landscapes do as well. So I will leave with a picture of the man himself with his grizzly bear. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. No, I don't.
Thank you, Bridget, for your generous and, sometimes a funny lecture. Before I open up the Q&A, I would like to start with the first question. I mean, I already mentioned, I thought let's say the transformation of the logo for the Dutch Natuurmonumenten was quite witty. I was curious if this image was used during the presentations, if they were shown this in a way, the people from Natuurmonumenten.
Yeah.
And how they responded to it, or how I can imagine that can be quite a funny moment during such a meeting.
I think they responded with a smile. Yeah, no. I mean, of course, it was a little bit of a joke, but yeah, at the same time, actually, we shouldn't just be conserving and protecting landscapes. I think, it's a great opportunity for us to be creative and to change the landscape. So yeah, it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and but yeah. But I think I think teasing with clients sometimes is quite important as well. To have some kind of rapport, some kind of fun with them, and to open up those kind of ideas and to test how they react to them. I think I think it's an important part of it's an important part of how we work. Anyway, we enjoy
sensing
that.
how far you can go with a provoke
Sometimes.
Is of course also a way to engage and to see how far you can go with a design. I can imagine, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes and also actually I think we do it to amuse ourselves as well. No, partly because that also, I think when you're kind of happy and enjoy, or when you can't. The only way you can design is if you're really, fascinated with the problem, and then you can, you really want to have, a little bit of fun with that problem, to turn it on its head, to rethink it, or that's when those are the exciting moments of designing. I think, yeah, and sometimes to play with your client as well, in that way is, it helps them to understand what they really want from a project as well. So yeah, I think it's important. I think it's very, very important. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Not just the fun. It should be a fun process. Well, it's not always. It can be painful, which I'm sure it can be painful with some that We've also had examples where it has been quite painful with public participation, where we've been attacked in Brixton, not attacked, but we did a project in Brixton, London, and everybody thought that we were going to destroy their place and that. And we said no. We won the competition, and we said, we didn't want to do anything like that. We wanted to just understand. So we went from standing in front of all these local people, and they were shouting at us, and hundreds of people at the door, to actually taking their ideas on board and trying to be creative with those ideas, and then the project was dropped, and then it was the local people that actually were up in arms, and they wanted the project back again. So I think you never quite know how it's going to be. But for us, the ideas should never be so. We talked about genius loci, ideas coming from the place. It's not just the place; it's from the people, and it's being creative with that I think is special about our profession. Is how you can turn their ideas into something that really is going to be special. So, thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer. Next question.
Hi. I'm Christy from Brazil. Thank you for your inspired lecture. I have many questions, but I'm a little obsessed with sewer system in cities, and I would like to ask, as you show a project that treats water in a way, or more than one actually, if you see that this is something that it could be implemented inside the urban fabric, in the middle of the city, and not like mechanized as a box, isolated.
So actually within the sea that you could, to treat sewage.
Yeah.
What, to treat the actual water in situ in the place?
Yeah.
I'm sure that I think it's about. I'm not an expert on all of that, but I think there's probably possibilities of doing that. I can see no reason why you cannot treat the water and then discharge it back into the sea. One interesting project, I think, is, and it's a bit of a sideline as well, but we did a project with our students at Harvard, which was actually inspired by a system of collecting all of the plastic from the sea, and then collecting all of that plastic, and then how you could kind of catch it and recycle it, and so I think there's lots of these kind of projects that are really going to be so important for cleaning up the environment. And I think this is, when I was talking about science and art, and I think this is really where this is our urgent need, is to kind of work with the scientists. So I cannot really answer totally your question, but I would say, it's something that you should find you find specialists, and you need. Projects are about teams, aren't they? They're not about individuals. So if you have to put all of the right people together, and then you've got your idea, and then you start to make it into a project. That's what's wonderful. But you have to find the science, and then you, as the designer, have to be creative with that, and then it becomes a project. So,
thank you very much.
Sounds interesting.
Hello. Hi, I'm Adif from Israel.
Hello.
I was wondering, you didn't talk much about the Tempelhof, but when you work on projects that are, such as Tempelhof, that are heavily charged with political and social contexts, how does that influence the style of landscape you develop, especially when you come from dreamlike, in-between realm approach to landscape and art and architecture?
Well, I think politics. Berlin is the Tempelhof is the fine example of a project that, and actually I think that project was, I think that project was lost not because of, it was lost through public misunderstanding about what was going to happen. And so often with political things, it's the public get the wrong idea about, it's like what I just said about Brixton, they get the wrong idea about what the project is going to do for the city. And it's all about communication, really, at the end of the day. But there's, so many projects get lost because of misinformation and misunderstandings and rumors, and then I don't know how you can deal with that. When cities take a vote on a project, and the local people don't really understand fully what they're voting. What they're voting for is, so often they're afraid of development that's going to happen, or that they, like in London, in Brixton, it was, were they going to be pushed out of their area, and the whole area taken over by yuppies and things. So it is a fine balance as well. I mean, as designers, we don't, you don't want to turn a place into something. You want to set it on a path that is the best for that area. But you don't. It's a difficult thing. Some things are out of your control, and I don't know how. I'm not a great at dealing with political situations, really. I mean, I think but I do think it's very important as designers that we do stand up and meet the local people, that we do engage with them, that we try and show them what the place could, what the idea is about, and what the place could become, and why it could be better. So I think that public engagement side of things is very important, very important. And somehow capturing their imagination, and the moving forest, the walking forest is an example of that. But there's been lots of, I've stood in many tents in London on talking to local people, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot. And so we do have to become like mini politicians as well sometimes. We have to understand what their values are and what they want, and talk to people. I think it is important. And I think not just, putting out leaflets and things, but actually having events where they come and they bring their families, and you talk to it, and those events should be on at the, when at the weekend. But I must say, the problem is always you get the same kind of people that come to those events. I mean, in Brixton as well, that really, Brixton's really important because of the Windrush generation of black people that are there, and at those events, it tends to be white middle class people that go. So the only way, I think, is to try and, if you put an event on somewhere where they're passing, and try and draw people in and talk to them on that level, and not have it as a platform, something like this, where it's only the confident, types of people that speak up. You need to get to the grassroots and talk to people. But I don't have, I don't know. You win some and you lose some really, you never really know. And it's a very fragile thing, I think, political systems, the ones that we've worked with are. So,
thank you.
I talked to you about your ideas on it, maybe later.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Mariano from Napoli, actually. So I have a very grounded question, maybe as banal, stupid. I mean, there is something very personal. It's just, I really love all the projects you were showing tonight. I really appreciate them much. But my question is, for a landscape architect, what's the boundary? I mean, how do you deal with the fact that you are altering something that has a shape because of natural reactions? I mean, how a landscape architect doesn't cross the line and say, oh, I'm altering a landscape. I'm somehow, I don't want to say spoiling this, because it's such a personal thing. Because, for example, the project you were showing before with the lakes, the perfect circular lake, I mean, it was beautiful. It was seriously amazing. But is it natural? How is it? I mean, there will never be spherical. I mean, how does a landscape architect deal with this?
Well, most of the time, most of the time you're problem solving.
Okay.
It sounds boring, but for me, that we are trying to solve problems. So it's not that we're, so there's a whole set of things like to do with connecting places together. There's a whole level there of, trying to solve all those problems, maybe trying to solve the pollution or the, so actually a lot of it comes from the problem solving. And of course there's an aesthetic, but that aesthetic often comes from the place as well often, or the type of landscape it is. So it is the genius loci really that you work from, and then you have to be kind of creative with that place. But there's things like the scale, all of those things, trying to understand the scale that things are working on, trying to understand, also to understand time, space and time, and how, projects, some projects are more temporary, they're quick things that, and that's their function. They transform something, it's not a permanent thing. So that it's just got to be something that transforms, and then maybe people enjoy it and that, and then it, you know, kind of move. So there's different things that are important in different projects. So it's not very easy to answer probably. But you know, the project comes from the, you know, there's a client, a brief, a site, a landscape, a lot of technical problems as well, you know, and all of those things, you know. So you're just solving all of those things, I think.
Okay. So it's like a reaction
and then,
of something.
but then you're making sure that the landscape, it doesn't become this monstrous green blanket, where it's just, you know, it still is it still has to have the spatial quality of, you know, like designing a building. You want in a building, you want some things that have that have the main impact, like this, and then you have the, you know, some kind of smaller rooms and parts. So it's, you know, in that way, there's a kind of hierarchy, you know, a structure, a hierarchy. So it's testing all of those things, just testing.
Thank you.
But yeah, nothing's ever perfect. It's just how at a moment in time as well, isn't it? It's just.
Got it.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I am Fabiola from Peru.
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation. I remember when you show us how we look at the horizon from the landscape architect perspective.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you your thoughts or maybe strategies that you have to how to deal with private and public space in your projects from a landscape perspective.
So private and public space. Well, a lot of the projects that are dealing with private and public space are maybe more on a kind of housing, or you know, so some of them, I've not really shown many of those kind of things. So you know, in a housing environment, you know, that's a kind of definite kind of, you know, idea about the public space, the semi-public space, the private space. I think, and getting the relationship between those things right, and the inside-outside relationship. You know, and that's, you know, between the building, you know, and the garden and the public space or the semi-public space. Getting those, designing with those. You know, how you deal with those things, how you deal with how people kind of occupy that private space and that, but still interact with people in the public space. So it's for me, it's thinking about how people use it, how people want to, how people feel, you know, how people feel comfortable. All of those things. But the horizon, the horizon is about big landscapes, isn't it? It's like looking out, that's on a different kind of scale. But public, private, getting that right is so important, because if private spaces don't feel private, and then they get occupied by the public, you have all kinds of issues that arise. I mean, I've worked on high-rise buildings that have had no private space between the building and the landscape, and just simple things like trying to just transforming that intermediate zone and making sure that there is some private space between the building and the landscape, and that private space allows an interaction between the people in the private garden and the public garden. Really totally transforms a living environment, I think. Yeah. And often it's often that kind of cross section, to look at those things in the cross section, I think helps the most, kind of understand the, you know, height and inside-outside relationship, and, you know, to really, you know, thoroughly kind of understand those things.
Thank you very much.
Also, there's different notions of what is public and what is private in different nationalities. And you know, in Holland, I mean, I walk down the streets and all of the houses, you can, you know, they're all lit and you can look in. And whereas we, in our country, you know, all the curtains are drawn, or you know, the net curtains and the curtains, and it, you know, there are different ideas about, or different cultural things that you have to understand. So, hello.
Hello, thank you again, Bridget.
Thanks.
I'm Raymond from the United States.
Hello.
The images of Apollo and Dionysus flashed by very quickly on screen, and I understand you used them to perhaps talk about the contrasting ideas of like a hedonistic aesthetic approach versus a logical approach to thinking about the landscape. But I was wondering if there was anything more explicit or implicit for you, and how you design, and how these things can help you resolve your so-called romantic agony. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think landscape, it's about balance. I don't know. I think that is it. It's like balance. You know, you're balancing those two things. Or it's almost like scales that you're kind of trying to to make sure that you balance that kind of more rational side with the more hedonistic, or whatever. And again, it's like the question before. You cannot talk. It's very difficult to talk in a generalized way about it. But I do think that landscape can reconcile those two approaches and that's really what we try to do in our work as well. So, on the one hand, we're super rational, trying to be super analytical about what the problem is, what the real issues are, how we can maybe solve some of those issues, and how we can generate a project from that. But at the same time, adding in, maybe some kind of fun, or because the landscape has to be a pleasure for people to occupy as well. So thinking about those kind of atmospheres that people can kind of enjoy, and that's those two things I think can be reconciled in a project. So yeah.
So do you think you're both Apollo and Dionysus at the same time?
Oh no, I wouldn't like to think that big. Okay. I think, yeah, there are gods up there. No, I wouldn't go that far. Yeah, I think it is useful for us to think in that way. They think in those extremes. Think in extremes sometimes as well, and then to reconcile those extremes of view. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
One last question.
Unless there are others. Jin has one. He will have the last question. No? So, but I have one in between. Well, maybe it's a two-part. It's two different questions. One, the idea between problem solving, right, which is kind of grounded in reality, excuse the pun. But then on the other hand, your practice is not only that, but it's also problematizing a set of conditions, or problematizing what landscape architecture could be. And so maybe your thoughts on that, and then tangential to that, or aligned, would be the issue of representation. So you are not nostalgic. So, well, the imagery is very atmospheric, so, and painterly in a good way.
Yeah.
Not what I was sort of critiquing before in general about maybe landscape architecture, watercolory and this kind of, it's the atmospheric to set something, so the images do that, but then the drawings or the models are not nostalgic about kind of contours that are not imitating a nature, but almost using a software or a geometry to create a kind of another kind of geometry. So how do those things relate to, one, the idea of problem solving, which you've outlined, but how do you view your method of representation in terms of problematizing the future practice of landscape architecture?
Yeah. I mean, I actually, I mean, sometimes when I've been teaching, I do think that designing is problem solving. I really believe in that. I don't think it's about plucking, ideas out of nowhere. And then, I really think that well, for as landscape, we can be far more creative if we're trying to solve problems. If we, and that's, you've got something that you can get your teeth into really, and you can kind of try and work on. Whereas if you're just plucking ideas from everywhere and that, it's an endless process, designing, your solutions.
Well, one needs the parameters.
We do. I mean, the solutions have to come from a whole set of parameters, yeah. And that's what makes it interesting, but not easy, never easy. But your point about the representation, this is really, we work on projects now sometimes where they bring in these officers that do all those renders. And they bring them in and then they say, oh, can you talk to the rendering company and say, well, what kind of plant you want there and what. And the result of these are horrible. They are just death. I mean, they all look the same. You see them in magazines and they've all got the same, there's certain companies and they all use exactly the same sky, exactly the same weather conditions, the light, there's no sense of trying to show what it would really feel like to be there. They're just like, they're just like pictures that, you don't feel you can engage in at all. And I think what we like to do is to try and do something that people can kind of feel that they could understand the atmosphere of what the place could be. And I see a real trend in this. There's a project in London that's just been announced, a big project, and famous landscape architects showing these images that. They don't belong. They don't belong to that place. They don't look. But the problem is, if they show we had the discussion about political things. Sometimes those images are very tempting for politically, because they are a bit nothing, or they don't they don't really show the atmosphere properly, and and I think for me that's such a pity, and I think we really are starting to lose something with those rendering companies that can make them hyper real and hyper perfect, and and that's that. I don't know. We never produce images ourselves like that because we always want them to show more of an atmosphere than anything else. But so often they don't use that. These companies that are brought in to make it all nice and cute and happy and the right kind of people in the, whereas in our images, I have a joke in the office that I think that it's the people that make the images, often it's the people that you put into those images that give so much. Whereas in those renders done by these companies, they've always got their nice little, pushchair with a little kid and all of those cute little things that they're trying to say, buy into this and it'll be a nice little wonderful world. I have certainly seen a change. I've seen a change from, exciting time. I think it's because of the computer. When in our early days of the computer, so I belong to an era where when I was at your stage, no computers, no nothing at all. Not even to type your essays on. And then that's probably why we got a bit excited about, when we started to be able to use Photoshop and all of those things. And now you see there's a kind of trend to make cute little drawings as well, with green grass and nice trees and green grass and all of those things, because they think that's what the public want. But I think the public have got much more about them than that. I actually think you're pulling the wool over their eyes. And people, if you show them something that is a little bit more showing them, they engage with you and they want to talk about it. Whereas if I don't think people are stupid. They don't want your chocolate box place. But I've really seen a change over those 20 years in terms of what is happening. Because you can model everything now. You can put on those glasses and kind of walk around. We did the project with Goldman Sachs that was on the roof. They had 3D kind of things that they could see what it was going to be like. But you never can express. You have to express a bit more about what the weather, what the weather would be like, or whether they're not just like nice still places. Any of these places. So, a bit of a roundabout way of answering.
That's clear. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi, Jin. And so you talked about, I guess, landscape kind of preservation, but I don't think this is the right term for it, but landscape restoration, or basically what I'm trying to talk about.
Conservation.
But the land here used to be, it's polder land, but used to be kind of peatland, and kind of reverting it back into that state. Do you think this is just kind of a naive kind of imagination? And also along with that, is it how possible is it for kind of an urbanized nature? I mean, is that just landscape design, or is that kind of separate from kind of, what that would mean?
I don't know. So you mean, maybe I'm not fully understanding it. So something to do with the difference between conserving the landscape and preserving it, and designing
well, I guess taking taking a polder and trying to return it back into a peatland.
Oh, trying to turn the polder landscape back into nature.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why you would. I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
The polder lands. Well, you maybe will do that at some point in Holland, but the polder landscape came from a need for the land and for the farming and so all of landscapes are really a product of what's necessary at the time. To some extent, the thing about the Dutch is you've got so many so many possibilities to transform your landscape. Edinburgh, we don't. It's such a different kind of landscape. The topography is so different that we have to design the landscape in a different way, I think. Whereas in Holland, you could make these huge big projects, and you could kind of put big dikes around and start to pump out the water and to control the level of water in those areas. And that's really exciting. That is really exciting. And I think in Holland, within those polders, there is a move. I don't know so much. I mean, I'm obviously not based here. To make nature, to add nature. And I think there's a way that, and then sometimes it becomes a bit strange because the nature becomes this, almost like a kind of cute little thing, and and it doesn't need to be, nature. You can provide, you know, there's lots of creative ways in terms of trying to make a natural environment. But there's this kind of tendency to think that, you know, that kind of rigid, that's not nature, if it's like that, but if it's like this, it's nature. It's not, it's just you know, it's a bit of a ridiculous idea in a way. That, you know, you could have beautiful, you know, say the polder has to be, you know, farming has to come out, that structure is amazing. You could create amazing kind of landscapes that don't have to become these kind of romantic little pieces within. So, I suppose what I was trying, we come from quite in Britain, you know, obviously the picturesque, the sublime, the beautiful, all of those things are very much part of our landscape and our culture. And in Holland, it's a completely different, it's a different kind of culture, a different way of thinking about the land. And if you work in other countries, you know, every culture has its way of dealing with nature and the landscape. So, but I think you could write a PhD on it.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, audience, for coming. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you very much for being a great audience and being nice, interesting questions and stimulating questions.
It was wonderful to have you as a keynote speaker at the Berlage.
Thank you very much. Really nice. Thank you.